A young man destroyed the statue of the Virgin Mary at school in a moment of anger. What happened to the shattered fragments changed two lives in a way no one at the school could have imagined. This is the story of Tyler Morrison and the miracle of the Virgin Mary that no one expected. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I would love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching a Catholic school in Denver with almost 70 years of history, hallways with worn marble floors, and a small but beautiful chapel on the second floor, always open for students who needed a moment of silence. Tyler Morrison was 18 years old, brown hair always a little messy, tall for his age, a player on the school's basketball team. The kind of boy who greeted everyone in the hallways, who helped teachers carry materials, who made friends easily. But in the last 6 months, something had changed. Those who paid attention noticed. Tyler arrived at school 15 minutes early every day. He didn't go straight to the gym like before. He didn't stay in the courtyard talking with friends. He went straight to the chapel, every day, without fail. He sat in the same front pew. He looked at the image of the Virgin Mary that stood on the small altar, hands together, head bowed, praying in silence for 10, sometimes 15 minutes. Most students didn't know why, but the teachers knew, the office staff knew, and Mr. Robert knew. Robert Patterson was 60 years old. He had worked as the school janitor for 25 years. He knew every corner of that school. But more than that, Robert knew the students, not just their names. He knew their stories, their fears, their joys. And he had watched Tyler Morrison grow up there since he was 11. Robert cleaned the chapel every morning. When he finished, he always stayed a few minutes in silence, sitting in the back pew. He prayed too. He had his own battles. That's how he started to notice Tyler. 6 months ago, the boy had begun showing up, always at the same time, always in the same pew, always with that same expression of silent pleading on his face. Robert never asked, but he watched with compassion. Because Robert understood pain. Robert understood pleading. 2 years earlier, his kidneys had begun to fail. Advanced stage chronic kidney disease. The doctors explained using technical terms he did not fully understand. But he understood the important part. His kidneys were shutting down. Dialysis 3 times a week. 4 hours sitting in an uncomfortable chair in a clinic that smelled like disinfectant. It was exhausting, physically and emotionally. But Robert kept working. Because he loved that school, he loved the students, and because stopping would mean admitting that the illness had won. So every morning he was there, cleaning, fixing, caring. Until one October morning, Robert saw something different. Tyler had arrived as usual, but this time his mother was with him. They talked briefly at the chapel door. Robert saw when she hugged her son. He saw when she wiped her own tears before leaving. When Tyler walked into the chapel alone, his eyes were red. That's when Robert understood. Jake Morrison, Tyler's younger brother, was sick, very sick. In the months that followed, Robert watched Tyler change. The outgoing boy became quieter. His easy smile appeared less often. His grades began to slip a bit. But the prayers never stopped. It was a Tuesday in March, an ordinary day. Tyler was in history class when the secretary knocked on the door. "Professor Martinez, sorry to interrupt. Tyler Morrison, the principal needs to speak with you." Up. Tyler froze instantly. He knew. He didn't need to ask. He knew by the way the secretary avoided looking directly at him. He knew by the way his hands started to tremble even before he stood up. In the empty hallways, his footsteps echoed. Each step felt heavier than the last. In the principal's office, his parents were waiting. His mother's face said everything before a single word was spoken. "Tyler," her voice cracked. "Jake, he passed away this morning. The rest was noise. Tyler heard words without processing meaning. He knew you loved him. His father hugged him. His mother cried. The principal offered condolences in a gentle voice, but Tyler was somewhere else. He was 6 months earlier, when Jake had received the diagnosis. He was in all those mornings praying, in all those nights lying awake, asking, begging, bargaining. Tyler couldn't form words. He just walked out of the room. He wandered through the hallways without direction. His feet moved on their own. Teachers who saw him later would say he looked like he was in a trance, eyes fixed ahead, face completely pale. He climbed the stairs to the second floor. His feet stopped in front of the chapel. The door was slightly open. Soft light filtered through the stained glass, the familiar silence that had always brought comfort. Tyler pushed the door and walked in, and he saw the image, the Virgin Mary on the altar, standing, hands extended, a serene face carved in white marble. A mantle painted in soft blue, the same image he had looked at every day for 6 months. Something broke inside him. "I prayed," his voice echoed through the empty chapel, louder than he intended, filled with a pain that came from a place he didn't know existed. "I prayed every day." He walked up to the altar, hands trembling. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't even notice. Why? Why, him! Tyler grabbed the base of the statue. For a second, he just stood there, holding it, as if holding himself up too. Then he pulled. The statue was old, heavy, but anger gives a strength that logic can't explain. The base tore away from the altar with the sound of stone scraping against wood. Tyler dragged the statue to the floor. It fell. The sound of marble shattering against the ground was like thunder. It echoed through the walls, through the halls, through Tyler's heart. The image broke. Not completely, but enough. Tyler looked at what he had done. For a moment he froze. Then he turned and ran. He ran down the stairs, crossed the courtyard, left through the school gates without looking back. It was his mother who found him 2 hours later, sitting on a bench in a park 3 blocks from the school. She didn't ask where he had been. She just hugged him, while both of them cried. At school, the news spread quickly, but when the details emerged, the reaction was different from what it would normally be. The principal, Father Williams, gathered the teachers. "Tyler Morrison is living the worst day of his life. He acted out of the deepest pain a person can feel. We are not going to punish him." There were murmurs of agreement. Even the strictest teachers understood. It was Robert who cleaned up. He had been downstairs when he heard the noise, that terrible sound of something breaking. He climbed the stairs as fast as his tired legs allowed. When he entered the chapel and saw the fragments scattered everywhere, his heart tightened. But then he saw Tyler running. He saw the boy's face, and Robert understood immediately. He stood there for a few minutes, just looking at the pieces. The image that had stood on that altar for decades. The image that had witnessed thousands of prayers. The image Tyler had looked at with so much hope for so many months. Now in fragments. Robert went to get a box. But when he knelt down to start gathering the pieces, something made him stop. He looked more closely at the fragments, the face still intact. There was something about those pieces that made Robert decide to handle them with more care. And he began picking up the fragments with his hands. That was when it happened. The moment his fingers touched the first piece, part of the blue mantle, Robert felt something. Heat. Not the ambient warmth of the chapel, but a specific heat. Focused. Coming from that cold marble fragment. Robert froze, looked at his hands, then at the fragment. And then came the smell, roses. Robert looked around. There were no flowers in the chapel. There never were. But the scent was real, delicate, sweet. He sat on the nearest pew, still holding the fragments. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from something he couldn't name. He stayed there for long minutes. Then, with reverent care, he continued gathering each piece. He placed them all in the box. Every fragment, no matter how small, was collected and kept. When he finished, he carried the box to the basement storage room. That night, Robert went home with the smell of roses still lingering in his memory. And he went to dialysis on Friday as always. But something was different. The nurse who had been attending him for 2 years, Margaret, noticed first. "Mr. Patterson, your blood pressure is better today." Robert shrugged. Blood pressure fluctuated. It happened. But the following week there was another observation. "Mr. Patterson, your levels are a little different. Not bad, just different." He didn't think much of it. He had other worries. Tyler hadn't returned to school. Robert asked discreetly. He learned the funeral had been private, that Tyler was at home with his family. Weeks passed. Robert continued his work, continued dialysis. But something was changing in his body in ways he barely noticed at first. Less fatigue, a bit more energy. Dialysis, which usually left him exhausted, started to feel less heavy. At his monthly appointment with Dr. Julian came the first real indication. "Mr. Patterson," the doctor was looking at the results with a confused expression, "your kidneys are responding." "Responding?" "Functioning better, not dramatically, but there is measurable improvement." Robert remained quiet. "It's unusual," Dr. Julian continued, "but it happens. Sometimes there are fluctuations. We'll monitor it closely." But it wasn't a fluctuation. In the following weeks, the improvement continued, gradual but steady. Dialysis, which was 3 times a week, went down to 2, then to 1. His energy increased. Color returned to his face. The deep exhaustion that had followed him for 2 years began to fade. Dr. Julian was genuinely puzzled. "We don't know why, but your kidneys are definitely functioning better." Robert knew when it had started, the day he touched the fragments. He told no one. How could he? It would sound absurd, but he knew. Tyler returned to school 3 weeks after the funeral. He was different, thinner, quieter. There was a shadow in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He avoided the chapel, took longer routes between classes, just to avoid passing the door. The teachers were kind. His friends tried to help, but Tyler withdrew. He carried something heavy. Robert could see it. Everyone could. Guilt. One afternoon, 2 weeks after Tyler had returned, Robert saw him sitting alone in the courtyard during lunch. All the other students were in groups, talking, laughing. Tyler was isolated. Robert approached. "Tyler." The boy looked up. Recognition, and something like fear, crossed his face. "Mr. Robert, may I sit?" Tyler shrugged, but didn't say no. Robert sat on the bench beside him. They remained silent for a moment. "How are you?" Robert finally asked. "Fine." The answer was automatic. Empty. More silence. "Tyler," Robert said gently, "I used to see you pray." Tyler tensed. He didn't respond. "I know you're hurting." That was when Tyler broke. Those shoulders he had kept rigid for weeks finally collapsed. "I destroyed the statue of the Virgin Mary," he said, his voice low and heavy with shame. "Tyler, look at me." The boy obeyed reluctantly. "You lost your brother. You were in pain. No one blames you." "I blame myself," Tyler whispered. Robert took a deep breath. Then he decided, "Tyler, I need to tell you something." And he did. About gathering the fragments, about the warmth and the smell of roses, about the inexplicable improvement in his health. Tyler listened in complete silence. When Robert finished, the boy had tears in his eyes. "How?" was all he could say. "I don't know," Robert answered honestly, "but I know something happened, and it happened with the pieces of the image you broke." They sat there for long minutes. The noise of the school around them felt distant. Finally, Tyler asked, "The fragments, do they still exist?" "Yes, kept safely. Can I? I'd like to see them." The next day, after school, Robert took Tyler to the storage room in the basement. The box was on the shelf where he had left it. Robert removed it carefully and placed it on a workbench. Tyler approached slowly. When he looked inside the box and saw the fragments, his breath caught. There was the face he had looked at with so much hope. "I did this," he whispered. Tyler touched one of the pieces with trembling fingers, part of the blue mantle. They stayed there, both touching the fragments. Two people separated by decades in age, but united by something they couldn't explain. It was Tyler who broke the silence. "Mr. Robert, I'd like to restore it." "Restore?" "The statue of the Virgin Mary. Put the pieces back together. Rebuild what I broke." Tyler looked at the fragments with newborn determination. "I need to do this." Robert studied the boy's face. He saw something there he hadn't seen in weeks. Purpose. "It will take time." "I have time." "It will be difficult. Some pieces are very small." "I don't care." Robert nodded slowly. "Then let's do it together." They started the next day. Robert had some experience with restoration. He had fixed many things over his 25 years at that school, but nothing like that. They set up a workspace in the storage room. They brought in a large table, good lighting, proper tools. They began by organizing the pieces, the larger ones first, trying to understand how they fit together. It was like an impossible three-dimensional puzzle. But Tyler was patient, meticulous. Hours after classes, he was there. Robert worked by his side, teaching techniques, showing him how to use special marble glue, how to align pieces, how to be patient when something didn't fit. But more than restoring the statue, they talked, at first, about small things, school, basketball, work, then, gradually, about bigger things. Tyler talked about Jake, about what it was like being the older brother, about the guilt of being healthy while Jake was sick, about the promises he made and couldn't keep. Robert talked about his illness, about the fear of dying, about continuing to work because stopping would feel like giving up. And both talked about faith, about prayer, about what it means to believe when everything seems to be falling apart. "I was so angry," Tyler said one afternoon while working on a particularly difficult piece, "at God, at the Virgin Mary, at everything. And now?" Tyler paused. "I'm still angry sometimes, but I'm also grateful." "Grateful?" He gestured toward the fragments. This work. It's helping me in a way I didn't expect." Robert smiled. Weeks turned into months. Robert's health kept improving. Now he only needed dialysis once a week. Dr. Julian was calling it an extraordinary recovery, while admitting he had no scientific explanation for it, and Tyler was changing too. The shadow in his eyes was fading. He rejoined the basketball team, started smiling again, reconnecting with friends. But the restoration work continued. They had assembled most of the statue. The body was practically complete. In June, 6 months after that terrible day in March, the statue was finished. Standing. Restored. Father Williams organized a small ceremony for the reinstallation. It was on a Sunday afternoon. The chapel was full. Students, teachers, parents. The story had spread. Not all the details, but enough. Everyone knew that Tyler Morrison had broken the statue in a moment of deep sorrow, and that he had spent months restoring it. And everyone knew about Mr. Robert, about how his kidney disease, which had kept him on dialysis for 2 years, had improved in an extraordinary way. The two stories had become intertwined in a way no one could have planned. Tyler carried the restored statue of the Virgin Mary to the altar. His hands were steady, his face calm. He placed it carefully in its spot, stepped back, looked at the image he had destroyed and rebuilt. Father Williams approached. "Tyler, would you like to say something?" The boy hesitated. He hadn't prepared anything, but when he looked at the statue, at Mr. Foch, Robert sitting in the front row, at his family in the back pews, he knew what to say. 6 months ago, I broke this image. I was angry. I felt like my prayers hadn't been heard. His voice was clear, steady. But I was wrong. He looked at Mr. Robert. Because something happened to the pieces I broke, something I can't explain, and through restoring what I destroyed, I was restored too. Tears streamed down Tyler's face, but his voice did not falter. Jake, my brother, he's gone. And it still hurts. It will always hurt. But I learned that even in broken things, even in anger and pain, there can be grace. He touched the base of the statue gently. This image is no longer perfect. You can see where it broke. But I think that makes it more beautiful. Because it shows that breaking isn't the end, that we can be restored, that miracles can be born even from our anger. The silence in the chapel was absolute. Mr. Roberts stood up slowly. He walked to Tyler, and he embraced him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me purpose and healing, for letting me be part of yours." After everyone left, Tyler remained alone in the chapel for a few minutes. He looked at the restored statue. "Thank you, Virgin Mary," he whispered. And for a moment, just a moment, Tyler swore he could smell roses. 6 months passed. Mr. Robert Patterson completely stopped dialysis. Dr. Julian documented the case as unexplained spontaneous recovery. Robert returned to working full-time. His energy was better than it had been in years. And every morning before starting the day, he spent a few minutes in the chapel, looking at the restored statue, giving thanks. Tyler Morrison graduated with honors. He received a scholarship to play basketball at the university. But before leaving, he asked permission to do something. With Father Williams's approval, he installed a small plaque at the base of the restored statue. It simply read, "In memory of Jake Morrison, and in gratitude for the miracles born from broken hearts." Was it a coincidence? Was it a miracle of the Virgin Mary? What we know is that a broken statue became a symbol of something greater, and that two men, separated by decades but united by pain and grace, found healing not in what they asked for, but in what they received along the way. Before we finish, I want to invite you to be part of our prayer community for the Virgin Mary, a place of faith and hope where people from all around the world come together to pray and share the graces they have received. If you feel in your heart the desire to join this chain of prayer, click below and become a member of the channel today, and come pray with us. And if you made it this far, to the end of Tyler and Mr. Robert's story, do one thing for me. Write the word fragments in the comments, because sometimes the broken parts of ourselves are exactly what the Virgin Mary uses to create miracles. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read fragments in the comments, I'll know one more person believes that miracles from the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.